Hello and welcome back to our series Getting Started. My name is Gordon Dodderman. I'm from FTC Team 8372, Trial and Terror, and today we will be going over how to use methods.
So finally, one of the most important parts of programming is a method. Now, I may be saying that all of these are one of the most important parts of programming, but these three pieces of programming are all you will need to start programming your robot, so I would call them pretty important. So methods are basically chunks of code that you can create and use without having to rewrite the same chunks of code. So let's say you have like a 50 long line chunk of code that makes your robot like shoot a ball or climb a hill. And if you have to do that multiple times, that same action multiple times throughout a program, you don't want to have to keep rewriting that code or copy paste it. So rather, you can make a method. So the general layout of a method is outside of any of your loops or anything like that, and you just say public, return type method name, in parentheses your parameters, and then in your curly brackets, the chunk of code you want to run. So the return type is basically any of those data types that we went over in the first Java video, such as integer, boolean, and double. The method name is what you want to call each time you want to run your method. And then the parameters we will get into later, but those are more or less the numbers that you want to modify your code. So some examples of what methods can do are they are able to do calculations or count something and return that number. So you can imagine you're like, okay, method, go do something. And then once that method is done doing said thing, it will give you back a number or a letter or nothing if you want to. So to return a variable within your method, you would say return the value. So return 1 or return a variable or anything like that. Now this value type has to match what you put as your return type, but it can be any of those values and it doesn't matter. If you do not want it to return anything, you can simply say void instead of a data type when you first declare the method. And finally, the return will exit out of the method no matter where it is. So if it's in the middle and you say return, it will just cut out of the method and go back to your program. So parameters are specific variables that you can enter every time you call your method. So it's basically telling your method certain things about the specific situation, like currently the speed is 2, or currently my favorite color is green. Now that would never come up in a program, but it's just an example. So this can change how your method works slightly. So if you have a method, say, moving your robot, you can have a parameter for how fast you want your robot to move. So like an int speed. So another thing is that you have to put public in front of each of your method declarations. And you can look this up, but basically it allows all of your other programs and other parts of your programs to access this and not have any issues. So an example of this would be like public int add. So this is a basic method that adds two numbers together. So int number 1 and int number 2. And inside the code is int answer equals number 1 plus number 2. And then it returns the answer. So later on, I can say, okay, int speed equals add 4 and 2. So what would happen is when I say add 4, 2, it goes back to that chunk of code and replaces number 1 with 4 and number 2 with 2 and gives me the answer. So I would basically saying int speed equals 6. So an example of like how these methods work and how they should be used is like, let's say you write a book and it's a sailing book and you want to describe a large boat used for traveling long distances over sea. Now you could write that every time you wanted to say that they were going on a trip on a large boat used for traveling long distances over sea, or you could simply say ship. Now, which one would you want to say? Would you rather say ship like all 400 times, or would you want to write out the 10 word long description of what the ship is? So that's kind of a description of what methods are made to do.